In many ways, the world sucks right now. We're more divided than we've ever been, there's more chaos, war, and unrest all around the globe. Smartphones and social media that used to act as an escape have turned into digital prisons, trapping us into an endless stream of slop. People are noticing it, and that's why there's been an embrace of times past. Millions of people are giving up their smartphones for flip phones, 90s and early 2000s style is back, and every movie and TV show is a reboot. Nostalgia is having its moment. If you came of age in the 2000s and 2010s, the world might seem less desirable now than when you were young. We're plagued with division, misinformation, and a dawning age of technology that may or may not kill us all. When did things get so bad? When did our cultural mood start to plummet so badly that the past became the only place to look to for comfort? And is it a good thing that most of us seem to be stuck in the past? That romanticism of the past is nostalgia. It's a longing for an earlier time in our life, for a fantasy about a time in a different age. It's the emotion we get when we recall memories of people we love and moments that shaped us. But nostalgia is a complicated emotion. It's not necessarily all positive. Nostalgia is bittersweet. It can be a very triggering experience, potentially taking us back to traumatic times or distorting the past with rose-colored glasses to eliminate all the negative details. But it's also positive. We remember what happened and how that impacted who and what we are today. We experience things in our present lives through the of the past. We pass a restaurant we visited 5 years ago or a park we played at as kids. We smell the same kind of food our grandmother used to make. We hear a song that played at our high school prom. And technology and culture have taken note. Facebook memories transport us back to days gone by. The On This Day album on our iPhones propels us to send embarrassing photos to friends and family. But these moments of nostalgia are more than just a ridiculous photo from high school. They're about coping with potentially tough moments. That longing for the comfort of the past doesn't come out of nowhere. Nostalgia is a surefire way to feel better about whatever is troubling us in the present, for better or worse. And it's not something we have to think about very hard. Most people report experiencing nostalgia at least once a week. Nearly half of people experience it 3 to 4 times a week, usually triggered by negative events or feeling lonely. As a species, we've learned how to soothe ourselves with our memories. How long does it take to slip into a moment from your past? A sweet thing a parent said to you, a difficult time you had at school, or an adventure with a friend that you'll never forget. All of these memories, good or bad, are just waiting to surface to slip us out of our present moment. While making this video, I became nostalgic of the time before I had this channel. Me and friends would sit down on the grass in the park and talk about the very things I'm making this video about today. And it got me thinking, why don't I do that now? So I reached out to an old friend, Noah, and he always loved digging into the meaning behind words, so I thought he'd be the perfect person to help me explain a bit more about nostalgia.
Now, nostalgia first appeared as a term in 1688, coined by Swiss physician Johannes Hofer, but it has been a feeling described for thousands of years. Throughout literature and first-hand accounts, people long for home or reflect on their past. This shows us that the feeling of nostalgia has always been present and a universal feeling across cultures and periods. The word nostalgia comes from the Greek nostos, which means homecoming, and algos, which means pain. Essentially, nostalgia is a pathological homesickness. When Hofer first named the feeling, it was seen as an actual illness that was sometimes fatal if people became depressed and lonely enough to stop eating and starve to death. In the 1830s, a Parisian man was threatened with eviction and, upset about leaving his beloved home, took to his bed and refused to eat or drink. He was diagnosed with nostalgia and died after succumbing to profound sadness. And in the 19th and 20th centuries, we moved away from this medical idea of nostalgia, and the feeling became less strictly associated with homesickness and more related to the emotions that we know today. However, researchers continue to find nostalgia is universal, no matter where someone lives or their life circumstances. Nostalgia is, put simply, a form of memory. Memory is our brain's attempt to connect us with the past. But that's the thing, it's just an attempt. We do not have a record button, and every memory, especially nostalgic ones, are an inaccurate reconstruction of what actually happened. When we reconstruct nostalgically, our memory tends to skew positive. All of the events we remember are positive, but when we look back on them, we often paint over them with a broad brush. We gloss over the more negative details. That warm glow of the past is a key component of nostalgia. Because of this, nostalgia is an emotion that can boost self-esteem, increase meaning in our lives, give us a sense of social connectedness, and even improve our mental health. Nostalgia has been shown to heal loneliness, boredom, stress, and anxiety, and even improve overall memory in adults. We can indulge in private reminiscing, looking out the window at work, having just gotten a promotion, and recalling that award we won in high school, back when we thought that nothing could ever feel more validating than that moment. Or perhaps we drive by a park after a breakup and reflect on the final days that we had with a dog that recently passed away. When we are sad, we tend to think of the sad memories, but all the memories, sad or happy, can serve as a warm blanket in these quiet, personal moments. Then there's social nostalgia, where we reminisce with friends about days back in college when we'd trade notes for class, or on that beach trip we all took when the waves came up and soaked all of our stuff. Depending on how our friends respond to these memories, we can either have a positive or negative experience. If one of our friends chooses to focus on the fact that someone was late leaving for the beach that day, it might shift the dynamic. But in modern culture, one of the easiest and fastest, most unreliable ways to experience nostalgia is to reminisce on social media. Here, nostalgia takes on a whole new identity. Scrolling on our phones, people and images we don't know or recognize trigger our memories. In real life, we can filter who and what we spend time with, gravitating towards people who stimulate positive feelings. But on social media, we don't have the same kind of control, and suddenly we have nostalgia for things and times we didn't even know existed. Nostalgia is no longer just an emotion, it is a commodity. Pop culture has given in to consistently repurposing things from the past. Spotify offers a time capsule playlist to bring you back to different points in your life. Apps like Time Hop give us daily slices of the past, and sitcoms from the 90s continue to tally up big rewatch numbers on streaming platforms. Sociologist Rihanna Gabriel calls nostalgia the latest opiate of the people. We have become sentimentalists not just for our own past, but also for pasts that we weren't even alive for. Members of Gen Z are adopting styles synonymous with the 80s and 90s, and millennials, aka Gen X, are driving bands like Fleetwood Mac, which have been around for 50 years, to the top of streaming charts. Why are we so obsessed with old stuff? Well, there are two kinds of nostalgia. One is familiar to all of us, personal nostalgia, a longing for aspects of our own lives that are stored in our memory. But then there's historical nostalgia, which is an emotional attachment to a time in history that predates our own birth. Both types of nostalgia can come from feeling like we're missing something in our current lives. Whether we know it or not, we are constantly creating triggers for future nostalgia. When we go on vacation, we take photos, pick up random trinkets we find on the ground, and buy souvenirs that we don't need. These things help us tap into a memory that we might otherwise forget. Researchers in the field of social and personality psychology call this anticipatory nostalgia, and this has probably always existed, but it takes on a whole new life in our current world where we have so many technological tools to capture and trigger memories. We are creating that warm blanket of nostalgia that we might need in the future every single day, and we never know when we might need it. Nostalgia isn't just an emotion, it can be a remedy. It can respond to tough moments, which is perhaps why we've seen such a resurgence in recent years. We live in intense, complicated times. Nostalgia acts as an antidote to existential dread. Didn't we all scroll through old photos during the COVID-19 pandemic to reminisce about when we were anywhere but stuck inside our homes? Nostalgia can help us process a difficult situation and serve as a coping mechanism. It will remind us that there was a time in our lives when we didn't have to earn love. We didn't even deserve it, but people loved us unconditionally. That can be a comforting feeling when times are tough. Studies have also found that loneliness triggers nostalgia. It helps us feel happier and reminds us of times when we had people around us. Nostalgia can serve as a temporary replacement when we can't see friends, are feeling homesick, or have lost someone that we love. More than that, it can connect us to who we are. Nostalgia returns us to somewhere safe and familiar when things are strange and uncertain. It reminds us that our current situation is just a moment in a long line of our lives, and that this too shall pass. One day, this will be another memory we look back on nostalgically. In a world where we don't often feel like we have control, nostalgia offers us a sense of control over our lives and personal development. By serving as a stabilizing force during times of change, nostalgia is a comforting reminder that we don't know what the future holds. We go back into our memories and realize that we didn't know what the present moment would hold, but we made it through anyways. And we made it through because deep down, we know who we are. Many people recall that at major life moments like a wedding or the birth of a child, their whole life of memories comes to the surface, reminding them how far they've come in life and how many things have happened to get to this exact moment. Nostalgia is a way to keep track of things and maintain a sense of self through the ups and downs of life. However, the rose-colored glasses that accompany nostalgia can present complications. Sometimes nostalgia isn't as positive of an experience that we'd like it to be. Sometimes we look back on the past with so much admiration that we can convince ourselves of how truly terrible our present is. We will long for a time that seems better than the one we are in right now. We will dig ourselves into a deep nostalgia hole, looking for something different but never finding it. If you're miserable because of work stress or just got dumped, it's easy to reminisce about past jobs, success, or love. But is it going to change or help what's happening right now? Probably not. Nostalgia is an inherently contradictory emotional experience. Happy feel both sour and sweet. We feel warmth about the memory, but sadness that it's gone, or the inverse might be true. We might remember bad moments in our lives, but they seem more positive because we view them retrospectively. Remembering that romanticized versions of our past has benefits and withdrawals. Romanticization might have actually served an evolutionary purpose. For example, if women remembered everything exactly as it was, most wouldn't be so eager to have more than one child. Pregnancy and childbirth are often difficult and traumatizing. It's a function of our species' survival that we gloss over the bad, painful portions of the past. We keep going. This is necessary not just for continuing humankind's biology, but also for any sort of advancement and progress. The inherent irreversibility of time means that we can't go back, but we can remember conflict and tension as something different, something useful. So what exactly happens to our brain when we slip into nostalgic memories? Unsurprisingly, there has been an explosion of research into nostalgia in recent years. Both COVID-19 and major shifts in pop culture contributed to this surge. Scientists want to understand how nostalgia makes us tick, and why we are so prone to it in times of crisis and instability. Essentially, nostalgia is like mental time travel. Things like movies and music are easy triggers because our senses, like hearing, seeing, and smelling, are primary memory cues. There was an experiment in the Netherlands where researchers found that listening to songs made people feel emotionally nostalgic and physically warmer. This finding was echoed in research at China's Sun Yat-sen University, which showed that feelings of nostalgia were more common on cold days. These studies show that we can recruit nostalgic memories to help with physical comfort. Research also demonstrated that nostalgia can reduce our perception of pain and cortisol levels associated with our stress response. Nostalgia, it turns out, can make us feel really, really good. The areas of our brain that activate when we feel nostalgic are associated with self-reflection, autobiographical memory, emotional regulation, and reward processing. Self-reflection is the defining characteristic of nostalgia because it is emotion focused on the self. The medial prefrontal cortex is the region of our brain involved in self-reflection. It helps us with planning and decision-making and integrates the stimulation of personal thoughts, goals, and character traits. Researchers see heightened activation in this area when we reflect on information that is highly relevant to ourselves. Self-reflection is combined with autobiographical memory and the ability to travel into our own past. The hippocampus helps us process this type of memory. Now, nostalgia's interaction with autobiographical memory is unique. It tends to be a positive association with our memories as opposed to a feeling like rumination, which leans mostly on a negative processing of our past. And then comes our emotional regulation, because nostalgia is a rapid exchange of positive and negative emotions. The amygdala plays a key role in processing our emotions, allowing this rapid exchange to filter out the more negative elements and leave us with that warm, fuzzy feeling. Finally, our reward system is triggered in parts of the brain like the striatum, which becomes highly active during rewarding experiences, and the ventral tegmental area, which produces dopamine. So when our brain notes that nostalgia is a generally positive experience, it wants us to continue finding it. Now, scientifically, nostalgia is more than just recalling the past. It protects us against emotional distress. The rose-colored glasses effect is a big part of the psychology of nostalgia. It's an overly cheerful look at our memories. In various studies, people remember vacations, childhood experiences, and relationships as more joyful and less problematic than they actually were. This kind of selective memory retrieval makes positive memories more accessible than negative ones. This could be related to our reward pathways getting triggered when we recall positive memories, reinforcing the good, warm experience of nostalgia. This ultimately helps us foster a positive connection with our past and helps us navigate present challenges. Our brain has adapted to help us through life using nostalgia. So, are we more prone to nostalgia at certain points in our lives? Well, the answer is definitely. Nostalgia peaks in young adulthood, and then again when we hit old age. In our late teens and early 20s, we're in one of the most pivotal moments of developmental transition. We have one foot back in childhood and one foot forward anticipating adulthood. Some of our identity is still aligned with the past and being a kid, but we are also eager to forge ahead. Nostalgia serves as a connection between these two identities. At that age, we might ask, will the future be as nice and cozy as it was in the past? As we age, we might become more nostalgic about music that came out when we were, say, a teenager. It doesn't matter if we like the song or not. It's more about the songs signifying a specific time in our lives. This kind of nostalgia can also happen in old age when our physical well-being and health start to change or decline. We might find ourselves looking back, reminiscing not only at the life we had, which hopefully was a fulfilling one, but also at ourselves as a younger, healthier individual. When things are changing, we feel uncertain, and traveling back in time can be soothing. But how do we decide what time we want to visit? Can we pinpoint a specific moment, day, or year that felt like a demarcation of our lives? We all have those individual moments, whether they're marriages, breakups, promotions, layoffs, or that one vacation that we always dreamed on going and finally did. Sometimes there are collective moments that seem to separate a then versus a now. Moments that lure us to a before time. For many young people, 2016 seemed like one of those universal moments when things shifted monumentally. When you're lit up with nostalgia, do you find yourself in the pre-2016 world? In 2016, the Pulse nightclub shooting happened in Orlando, Florida, and was at the time the largest mass killing in US history. The world refugee crisis escalated, and more iconic celebrities seemed to die in 1 year than ever before. Gene Wilder, Muhammad Ali, Alan Rickman, Leonard Cohen, George Michael, Carrie Fisher, David Bowie, and Prince. Hamilton became a sensation on Broadway and sparked a new conversation about race in American history. Governmental shifts like Brexit and Donald Trump's election rocked the Western Hemisphere to its core. Signs began to emerge that fear and tribalism were effective political tools. An era of us versus them began. The proliferation of white nationalist talking points online also began. People shared seemingly innocuous memes that were actually symbols of hate. We all found our corners of the internet and our own social and family lives that felt like safe silos. Society was officially split digitally and in reality. The always prescient South Park aired episodes about member berries, a play on the word memories, that let you enjoy the culture of your youth. This tapped into a new feeling that the current state of the world might not be ideal, and because it's South Park, the berries also reminded characters of a time when there were fewer immigrants, and marriage was also between a man and a woman. 2016 made many of us long for the past in very different ways. Some of us wanted to return to a time that felt less divided and more inclusive, while others longed for a perfect society that was inherently exclusionary of so many. So how should we think about these diverse types of nostalgia for our pre-2016 lives? Well, at England's Southampton University, researchers induced negative moods by having people read about deadly disasters and take personality tests that revealed them to be very lonely. These people became depressed, but the test pushed them to trigger feelings of nostalgia, and their mood immediately improved. When the world feels like a disaster, it's no wonder we bring ourselves back in time to counteract our loneliness, boredom, anxiety, and depression. Taking a little mental trip down memory lane can work wonders, and the memories themselves don't have to be great for nostalgia to be beneficial. Studies show that remembering the past can effectively combat difficulties in the present day, even for people with traumatic pasts. When we lean into nostalgia, we're more generous towards strangers and tolerate different types of people. So perhaps if we feel the world is suddenly alienating to us or the people that we love, nostalgia can make our place in life feel more meaningful and empathetic. As our access to the world has proliferated over the last 8 years thanks to apps like TikTok, we might also have the urge to turn inward and feel more connected to the actual people in our lives. Nostalgia helps bond us to parents, siblings, friends, and partners. Couples tend to be closer and happier when they share nostalgic memories, and people with nostalgic tendencies feel more loved and protected. All of this can bolster our psychological resilience. If we revisit past challenges we've overcome, we can draw strength from them to conquer something in the present moment. Imagine an instance where you've been in a workout class, and the instructor asks you to recall a time where you faced resistance and conquered it. They'll probably then suggest you apply that feeling to the physical task at hand. This is nostalgia at work. So should we all be indulging in nostalgia a little bit more? Maybe. Well, it's good to talk about emotions as part of our individual history and in society at large. Diving into our past personal emotions brings up all sorts of benefits. Just ask anyone who has ever gone to therapy. This kind of self-reflection can help boost inspiration and creativity and make us feel more youthful, alert, optimistic, and energetic. It can encourage us to take risks and pursue goals, gives us context and perspective, and reminds us that life is its own story. Even if there isn't meaning right now or everything feels totally out of whack, purpose and normalcy will return again. Ultimately, nostalgia unites our sense of self and identity. We are constantly changing. We're never going to be the same way as when we were a kid or when we were 17 or when we were 20. But uniting the memories from all of those different eras of life cues us into our authentic selves. T.S. Eliot wrote, "You are not the same people who left that station, or who will arrive at any terminus." We wake up every morning slightly different. Memories keep us together as one constant person. Nostalgia fosters a sense of meaning in that continuous life of change. It helps us learn about not just ourselves but other people. If we listen to their nostalgic memories, we can better understand how they have changed and what feelings they long for. If you've ever sat down with a grandparent and asked them to talk about their childhood, you've probably experienced this. It's almost impossible to imagine our aging grandparents as little kids, but hearing it directly from them brings a new life into who they are. This kind of nostalgia exchange connects one generation to the next. Even as our world insists on moving forward, and even if its direction doesn't always feel great, we can still look to the past for things of value and comfort. Is looking into the past always helpful? Nostalgia is generally seen as a positive thing, but what about the exception to that rule? Personal nostalgia, like remembering our first kiss, is different from historical nostalgia in which we imagine a different era of the world at large. Perhaps this global and cultural nostalgia can get us into trouble. Since nostalgia can be something that pulls us away from reality and the present moment, it can also be seen as a form of self-deception and distraction. Nostalgia distorts and idealizes the past. The bad and boring bits are erased. This rosy retrospection that nostalgia is famous for might be helpful if we seek comfort. Still, it can be dangerous if it convinces us that there is some sort of utopia that never actually existed. Even more dangerous is that perhaps we think that utopia is worth pursuing at all costs. That pursuit can take the joy out of this present moment. This pursuit of an ambiguous utopia has influenced politics and society. Since 2016, Nostalgia has been a place people think they came from, rather than a place that they can travel back in their minds to in order to feel good. People are trying to recreate something that was never actually there. It's so easy to fall prey to this sort of messaging, that the past has all of the answers and that restoring things to the way that they were is the goal. But the hard fact is that the past is not coming back. In real life, time is not going backwards, and the only option is to progress. We can indulge in nostalgia to give us a sense of comfort and connection, but it is not a destination. We cannot bring back the exact moments that made us feel good in the past. We can only conjure those feelings to aid us in the pursuit of the present. Many of these isolationist movements in modern culture are abusing nostalgia to recreate a past ideal that was not actually ideal at all. The images of the past that they tout are overly white and overly male. In this sense, nostalgia is being aligned with retrograding. At its worst, nostalgia is a yearning for a time when the world was less equal, less progressive, and less kind to everyone. One might be nostalgic for a time, but they are not thinking about the full context. Just because you long for the familial connection you had in the 1950s, it does not mean that the 1950s is the perfect era to recreate. Just ask someone who was racially discriminated against. Or perhaps you're looking back at the 1960s and reminiscing about Woodstock and free love. That's not taking into account the anti-war protests and widespread violence that accompanied those more peaceful movements. We can't be selective about what history we long for if we are trying to recreate it. Longing for the good old days is just fine, but thinking that the good old days can return and become the future is impossible and unhealthy.
As much as we can look to nostalgia to soften tough times, we must return to our present moment, even if it might feel disconnected, stressful, and divided. If we are unhappy now, it's easy to convince ourselves that things must have been better in the past. If nostalgia teaches us anything, it's that the past inevitably becomes romanticized. Soak it in, but take it for what it is. A memory. It's not a goal or a destination, it's not a roadmap for what the future should look like either. And to think that your past is the one that should rule the world is ignoring the great diversity of another experience across our planet. What is comforting to you might be scary to another, and that's why nostalgia works best when it lives in our heads. A friendly escape to another time, but never a concrete thing to impose on other people. So much of how we feel about the past depends on how we're doing in the present. In our current times, a lot of people are hurting, looking for things to simply be different. And that's alright. But to think that the answer to that hurt lies in recreating the past is naive. Nostalgia is both pain and pleasure. It's the desire for the past coupled with the dissatisfaction with the present. It's born out of a fear that our future won't be as good as our past, but was the past really that good? Yes, it can have some helpful effects, like helping us deal with stress, find meaning in life, and, for some, make death less frightening. Its sweetness entices us to revisit our past, but its bitterness comes with knowing that the past no longer exists. Nostalgia is an escape, but it's not the be-all or end-all. It's only useful when we can return to the present and let it positively impact our future.